carriage to Houston Memorial Gardens, where he'll be buried next to his mother. We are following it all.
Floyd's death has already forced change and accountability in police departments across the country. In New York, an officer has been charged after he was caught on video pushing a protester to the ground in Brooklyn. And New York state lawmakers are back to work on a series of sweeping reforms. They passed a bill yesterday to ban police kills. The bill is named after Eric Gardner, who died on Staten Island in 2014. A bystander recorded police putting him in a chokehold as he uttered the words, "I can't breathe." This bill would make it a felony up to 15 years in jail if an officer uses a chokehold that results in injury or death. There is an exception if the chokehold is used in self-defense. Joining us now is the sponsor of the bill, New York State Assembly member and Speaker Carl Heastie. And Speaker, New York City banned most chokeholds in the 90s, but that didn't stop Eric Garner's death a few years ago. So will this added penalty ban be symbolic because it carries deep consequences?
Yeah, because I think before this bill, even when Eric Garner, what happened to Eric Garner, it was raised that practice was illegal, but it really didn't have the same weight it would have had if you had a law in the books that said it's illegal to put somebody in a chokehold and there's a criminal penalty attached to it. In order, when they charged Eric Garner, we actually still don't know what the actual grand jury minutes said because those are kept confidential. But this now would allow, a direct charge, of violating a penal law on the books if a police officer was to do this to an individual.
Eric Garner's death was 6 years ago next month. Why has it taken 6 years to get this bill passed?
Sometimes, in life, there are important issues, important things happen. And I've spoken to all of these mothers. I have mothers in my assembly district, Ramarley Graham. Constance Graham, the mother of Ramarley Graham, was killed in my assembly district by a police officer in front of his grandmother and his younger brother. And you think that event would be one that would trigger something to happen. But I just think the inertia of what everybody saw on video and the fact that this is not just happened, people that weren't paying attention in Minneapolis or New York or California, it's all around the world. It really raises the conscience, it really questions people to say, boy, this is really, the one that breaks the camel's back. And I think this is the one that may have finally done that.
Some other bills moving include a bill to require courts to publish racial data on low-level offenders and for the police to track deaths connected to the arrest. It came out of a heartbreak of a failed marriage.
to make way for the president's photo op. In Buffalo, the advancing line of police who shoved an elderly man to the ground. In Atlanta, police yanking two kids from a car. In your mind, what's going on? Is it that we have more cell phone video of these events, or do you think there's more police aggression here?
Well, I think it's both. There's been an extraordinary level of police aggression. We've certainly seen that here in New York. And, you know, one of the fundamental problems we have is the police are just far too involved in protest. Protest is not a law enforcement issue, and the police should be out of the protest management business. I cannot tell you how often I am on the street with groups, and we represent groups organizing protests all the time, where the mere presence of police officers changes the dynamic, creates confrontation. And yes, there are rare circumstances where the police need to step in to protect people, like in all circumstances in life. But as a general matter, we just need to have far less policing of protest in this country.
Well, let's talk about some of the incidents we mentioned. Shayna Taub, sitting on her stoop, arrested for cheering. Is that legal? What was the charge?
3 blocks from where I live, she was charged with violating the curfew that we had in place until, under the threat of our litigation, the city lifted it on Sunday morning. You know, we had a situation where in New York City, whatever may have been the original justification for the first couple of days of the curfew, it became a tool for arresting protesters and using force against protesters. And then, as in her situation, actually arresting people who were essentially in their homes at 8:30 p.m. It turned into a completely unprecedented situation here in New York that went far beyond any concern about law enforcement into a suppression of political speech.
Well, then we have Tio Von Jordan. He's the 23-year-old who was kneeling in Charleston, South Carolina. He is black. This was in Marion Square. There were several rows of officers. Other protesters, many of them white, knelt behind him with their hands on his back for support. And this is what he was saying to the police.
You are not my enemy. We have to share this land no matter what. I'm here for you. I'm here with you. I'm not angry at none of you. I love all of y'all.
I love all of y'all. And a few minutes later, they seized him, and he spent the night in jail. The police chief there says his men had asked that crowd to disperse. It was an hour before the curfew, but the chief said he'd been asked to leave, and he didn't leave. Your thoughts on that? If the police tell you you have to disperse, don't you have to disperse?
Well, there are two things happening here. As a matter of law, you don't have to disperse. You're allowed to be on a public street peacefully assembling, and there, as you point out, that was before any curfew was in effect. But, you know, the practical reality, particularly for blacks as opposed to white protesters, is if the police tell you you have to disperse, that means they're likely to arrest you. And so people have to make a choice about whether or not they want to have that happen to them. But he was entitled to be there. There was no basis for telling them they had to disperse. And that arrest should never have taken place. And it just perfectly illustrates the police response to a national convulsion about police violence.
Just one last question, Chris. Do you see change? New York City lifted its curfew in part because the ACLU threatened to sue them. In Atlanta, the 2 officers who pulled kids from the car have been fired for excessive force. Do you see change?
We see some change. The question that all this faces, how long is it going to last and how deep will it be? We hope it is long-lasting and it is deep, but there's a history to be very skeptical about that.
Chris Dunn, legal director of the ACLU in New York. Chris, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We're south here from today's going home ceremony for George Floyd in Houston. It's here now.
And you're listening to Here and Now on WHYY. I'm Katie Culinary here with Annette John Hall, inviting you to support this public radio station. Help make it more public right now with your donation. Go to whyy.org/radio or call us at 1-888-345-9494. 2499. We've got a goal this hour of 20 pledges. We're starting fresh. We had 15 in for the last hour, and so we've got a little bit of work to make up for. But we are hoping that you are moved by this big challenge that we are working through that Annette is going to break down for you.
Yeah, this challenge is Carol Haas Gravano, who is a community member and has given a lot of money away to a lot of different organizations in this city, has challenged us to this pledge. If you and 3,999 others, at 4,000 in all, submit a donation by midnight on Tuesday, June 30th, which is a couple of weeks to go, she will give us the $75,000. What can we do with that $75,000? Well, we can fund a lot of programs. We can do a lot with that money to bring you the information that you need in these unprecedented times. For this goal, we'll be working on many goals all throughout the day to bring in 600 pledges in all toward this challenge goal. So please, today's the day to do it. Don't wait, because you know things change in a heartbeat. Give us your gift at whyy.org/radio. Hit that button on that webpage at the top, or give us a call at 1-888-345-9499.
Lucy from Downingtown gave a pledge to WHYY, and she left us a really wonderful note. She said, WHYY continues to be our primary source of news. Thank you for bringing fact-based and coherent news and discussion to all your listeners worldwide. And thank you so much, Lucy, for your pledge. You be the next person to join her in supporting this station. And it couldn't be a better time. We've gone through a lot in the Philadelphia region over the last few months, from the pandemic to the civil unrest and the reckoning over racism that we're experiencing. WHYY is bringing you the news that you need for this time. Go to whyy.org/radio.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and your NPR station. And from Atlassian, providing collaboration software to help keep teams on the same page when teammates are cities or countries apart. More about Atlassian's products are at atlassian.com/remote.
It's here now. We know that things like pap smears and mammograms have been postponed during the coronavirus pandemic. Now a cancer specialist is flagging another problem. He says emergency rooms and primary care doctors are missing cancers because some of the symptoms of certain cancers, like say leukemia, fatigue, cough, sore throat, are being mistaken for COVID-19. And for some, including one of his patients, that mistake can be deadly. Dr. Mikhail Sekaritz is director of the leukemia program at the Cleveland Clinic and author of the new book, When Blood Breaks Down, Life Lessons from Leukemia. This is alarming. And you had a woman who came to you after she'd gone to the ER with a cough and a fever. What happened?
This is so hard for people who fear catching COVID-19 that need medical attention. So I totally empathize with how she thought this through. She had some symptoms that could have been the flu, fever, cough, fatigue, and much more commonly than not, these are symptoms of the flu or some viral infection. Rarely, though, they can also be manifestations of a cancer. I specialize in leukemia, and a classic textbook description of leukemia is that somebody has quote-unquote flu-like symptoms for 4 to 6 weeks before the diagnosis is made. And that's exactly what happened with her. She figured she just had a virus and actually said that she wanted to avoid going to the emergency room initially because she knew that there were a lot of patients there who had COVID-19.
Yeah, but even when she went, they tested her for COVID-19, admitted her to a COVID rule-out unit, and they determined it wasn't. Now here was perhaps the most chilling piece of this article that you wrote about this. Because there are some cancers that are slower than others, and leukemia isn't one of them. Leukemia moves very quickly. It can double in number in as quickly as 2 to 3 days, the amount of cancer that she has. And so all that time was wasted before she got to you.
Right. So she went to the hospital, to the emergency room, and there's a saying in medicine when somebody presents with certain symptoms, you usually hear horses and not zebras. So they were treating a lot of people who were positive for COVID-19 amidst the pandemic, treated her the same, tested her, and when people are admitted to the hospital, they often will go to a COVID specialty unit